What are the assumptions your business model was founded on? And let's really spend some time thinking about when you created it, this is what it looked like. What were those assumptions? I hope have been written down, sometimes are not, that have guided your company to becoming what it is now. So let's go back to that and then really dive into those assumptions and then challenge them. And then once we can lay out the new assumptions, or if nothing's changed, if we are still in the same place and those assumptions still hold true, no need for change. You're in a good place. But if some of those assumptions have changed, then we need to explore which ones and which ones are going to be relevant, and not just now, where's the puck going to in the next 5 to 10 years, and how will those assumptions probably change. I'm the CEO and founder of Blue Green Advisors. So I work in the marine ocean space, but in particular with organizations that need to rethink their assumptions and are moving into different territory. So that's where I like to really focus. But I work for a lot of multilateral banks and development agencies, and then helping them deliver ocean investments on the ground to make sure they impact the people that they're intended to reach. So I guess that's my main focus, David.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And looking at your LinkedIn, it's the headline says anti-resilience strategist, and a lot of business books and a lot of podcasts in the entrepreneurship or building a business space talk about resilience as being one of the most important attributes that a founder, if not a person, can have these days. Could you help me understand, why are you anti-resilience, and what does that mean?
Sure. So my wife was killed, and my life changed dramatically. And during those few months, I was grasping for, where do I move forward? How do I lead through this situation? And as you mentioned earlier, David, there is so many books on resilience and being gritty and all these lovely terms, which, to be honest, when you're going through a major transition, are very academic and not really that appropriate, I found. So over the next 36 months, I read about 500 of these lovely books, looking for my own roadmap for when things have changed. How do you move forward? And I realized, the literature doesn't really deal with situations where things have really moved on and changed. So for me, in a nutshell, resilience is about going back to the past. But when things have moved on and there's pieces of that past have gone, you really need to, for me, regenerate, which is kind of really bounce forward, using what lovely things you've got remaining, the compost of that past. But you need to think about a future. And in all my work over the last 3 decades, working with ocean systems and ocean people, I've always learned that you're not going to get the past back. We're not going to restore the oceans or that system to what it used to be. It's going to move on to be a different system, more unique, could be very different, but it is something very different. So that's why I'm slightly opposed to the resilience claims of many and the theory, because you can't go back to a past that no longer exists.
Change being the only constant there. I notice you're using the future and the past as kind of cardinal directions there. And in Buddhism, they talk about the present. Now, full disclosure, I'm really bad at focusing at the present. I too am drawn to either the past or the future. I'm curious for yourself, have you explored kind of presence in the moment?
Absolutely. I realized that actually I made a promise to myself when my whole world was turning upside down. I within a few hours of the kind of the change coming, I promised myself I would not look back until my children were in a great place. And then, and only then, would I give myself the luxury of looking back. And that is when I spent the last couple of years writing the book, because I wanted to share some of that process that I went through. But no, I realized in the morning, you've got to get up and be very present and just go day by day and restructure and reframe your world from the bottom up. But you do need to have a clear direction where you're heading, and so that's very much the mindset piece. But so I didn't look back for 7 years, David, and then took the luxury of 2 years to think it all through together, and that's where the book landed.
Oh. So I have a couple of things to dig into there. So first is 7 years of not looking back, which would be, I guess, for a lot of people, a natural draw to want to do that and to kind of have that strength, I guess, to stop that and to force your consciousness somewhere else. When you did finally look back, do you think that was easier because you'd had that gap, or harder because you'd had that gap?
I think so I journaled a lot during the event, so I kept lots of books. So that was my way of kind of capturing things. But what I did with, and it was with my children, is we went on a big trip together. Every summer we spend time together, but we actually talked about how we would reframe the last 7 years together as a family. And so that's so for me, it was a joy to be with them, to rewrite how they framed the last 7 years, from being the eyewitness to the death of their mother, and then the change that they all went through, and then rewriting. So I haven't quite answered your question, Becky, but for me, it was a delight to have those 2 years with them, to really reframe the narrative around, not we were victims and this is what happened to us, but this is what happened, and this is how we changed our lives, and this is how we took total control over the situation that we'd gone through.
Yeah, it sounds like from what you said then, potentially that gap was a useful part of that process to be able to do that, to be able to look back and frame it in that way. Whereas if you'd done it, I don't know, 7 months later, that might have been a very different experience.
Agreed, but my incentive to myself was I love ruminating. I'm a ruminator. That's what I do for my clients. I think through the past. So I actually said, not allowed until you've delivered the job in hand, and then you can do it. So that was actually my incentive to myself to do that. And then, as I said, it was a luxury, and the kids were about the right age when we could start to begin to have some of those conversations. So yes, so it forced me to deliver on my job, which was to let the children be children again, which was what I wanted to deliver for them, on behalf of both myself and my wife.
I had one other thing just to dig in on before I shut up, which is you mentioned we talked about being present. I'm like David. I'm obviously very tempted by past or future. I think it's hard for most of us to be present. Considering you've lived in, you said, hundreds of different communities in coastal areas, have you noticed a cultural difference in whether or not people are present in the moment? Or is it a universal human thing that we're focused either side?
Brilliant. Very different in every different community. And then whether you've got the elders of the Pacific, so the paramount elders who've taken generations of knowledge and are the custodians of that knowledge moving forward, to a classic Asian urban environment where it's just assembled itself in the last couple of years and kind of bits and bobs everywhere, to everyone totally living in a totally different time. But I was saying, so yes, very different. And if anyone says to me Asia or Asia Pacific, that is so much diversity across that, and that each place is very, very different. Each island each community is also unique. So I don't think there's any generalizations, Becky, we can make.
What was the draw to the ocean and to Asia in general?
So I was a terrible fisher when I was growing up as a child. And so I would always sit there and gaze in the pond or the river and try and work out what was going on underneath. So naturally, that led me into fisheries at university. But in my third year, I found out there was this thing across the planet that people were using dynamite to catch fish. And I just could not understand the logic behind that. So I finished my degree. I took a year I worked a little bit for the UK government, and then I saved lots of money, got a backpack, and I went out to Asia in 1994, and then never really came back until the events that I discussed earlier in 2017, which was a bit of a short, sharp shock coming back. But yes, so it was that. And then I had the pleasure of working with communities who needed to get off the dynamite, other communities who were still whaling at that time. And so how would we transition 4 or 5 generations of people who'd been doing a certain livelihood onto a totally different livelihood? And the whaling was the big one for me. It was like 1800s they began. It was their tradition, and then all of a sudden the government said can't do that, and then all of a sudden so these are some of the things that drew me and then kept me, as I realized we have this conflict between social and ecological, and then how do you fit them together to work for each other?
There's also an element of change management, I imagine, as you're trying to align incentives and create and manage perhaps sustainable change. We have spoken to folks that have tried this with sustainability and showing the business model for sustainability. Now we're navigating the AI transition, and some people are wrestling with governance in AI. What would that look like in schools and businesses? Can you speak to how you address incentives to stop a multi-generational whaling industry or fishing with dynamite, for example?
Yeah. So very hard. So for me, is getting everyone together in the same room and then laying out some ground rules and building trust, the first step. So that's really kind of the first thing. And then working together to plow out a really strong vision for where this could go, if we are able to get it kind of working, and then working with everyone around that vision, and then kind of pulling, pushing, poking as we go through the process. But the ultimate incentive, laid out that, and some of this I try and look at from the perspective of the book is the realities have changed. So you can either go with it or you can let it drag you down. So for me is kind of get those early adopters in, and then really get them, a core of people going that, hey, that you can actually make good of this, and you can actually use it as a tool to make some changes. So for the whaling community, we agreed as the whole island is, can we become the best tour operators who are taking guests out to visit whales and dolphins, using their skills as spotting and seeing, and give a really authentic experience, and charge more than the general, the other tours, because this is the real opportunity, and then provide services around that. So that was one example with the whaling, which I think was my hardest experience. It was hard. It was some people have, their father's father had trained them how to hold a harpoon and how to do it. So, the education level was not amazing on the island. So kind of really working with that, but yes, trust, and then having a clear vision for the future, and agreeing some things you've just got to let go of, and get that kind of mindset piece going first, David. So, I mean, there's some of the ingredients that you need to string together.
If you could indulge me, I'd like to get a little granular, not to get too macabre or anything, but if we look at the incentives, and here I guess we could take the whaling example. I'm thinking about AI and the incentives of implementing it. So I'm trying to look at this one example where you have different incentives with different weights that you would then prioritize what needs to change, what would be nice to change, what might we sacrifice or accept as we can't find a replacement for it yet. And maybe through storytelling or having certain change champions, we can kind of create sufficient traction so that we change behavior. So with whaling, you mentioned multi-generational, there's an identity there, a family legacy. There's perhaps excitement, almost like rugby or something like that, where you're going out and there's this competition with human versus nature. There's also food, resources, oil, economy, providing for the family. Do you look at it? Do you kind of create like a spreadsheet or some kind of list and look at like what are the reasons that people, almost like an investigative journalist, where you're interviewing people and trying to understand why they're doing something, what they're getting from this, and then saying about what about this would I like to change or do I feel needs to change? And then could you talk us through the strategy of how you develop a plan and implement the plan to change behavior sustainably?
Oh, So I guess first thing is be quiet for a week and listen to everyone. So that would be one. And I would build my strategy would build around community events and activities. So being where everyone is, not just the dominant leaders. So make sure you cut across a whole cross-section of the community so you understand each perspective. So I think, so if we apply it to the AI model, that means everyone needs to be involved, not just the CEO, which is what we're all said has to lead, or the CTO, but it has to be everyone in the organization. And then just to understand, what are those drivers that are, who benefits from what piece? So with the whaling community, it was called Chop Chop. So it's like who would be chopping? The kids would be there. Who would be preparing the drying racks? Who would be salting the meat when it was drying? So you have to pour salt water over it. And then there was always a couple of individuals who were doing the marketing. So that was the more lucrative part of the business. So they would be buying and they'd be finding a buyer. So I guess so for me is understand the whole system first and then work out from each of those sectors, one leader from each, and see if you can kind of build out with them a kind of a new mindset and understanding their incentives, and then what could be their incentives for success moving forward. And so how could you kind of tweak it? The problem is, as you find with all communities and all cross-sectoral things, is there's going to be some winners and there's going to be some losers. And the losers are unfortunately the ones who are currently benefiting the most from the current system. So the ones who are selling blindly refuse to change any of their behavior because they were incentivized to continue the old system. Whereas some of the younger individuals who perhaps had other visions for their community or their family security, they tended to be more incentivized for the change. So that's how I'd kind of lay out the map and then kind of look forward, moving forward. I just for AI, it's it's going to be it's a bit different, but AI for me is 85% human. And it's just rethinking things with that kind of co-pilot, but it's a whole systems change. We need to rethink the firm, rethink everything about the current practices, your processes, and then finding what are the best. What do I hate doing? What is laborious? And give that to the AI and then keep this layer of human judgment, because as much as we've got everything scraped in all these LLMs, it's only 10% max of human knowledge. What about all the tacit knowledge, all the reasons why the senior partners do X, Y, Z in all the companies? And the last, a few decades of work, that is not in the AI. So it's about stacking against that, and then let the AI do what it's good at, and then really helping with the judgment. So I'm not sure if I made the transition well there for you, David, but it's about totally rethinking the system. And so again, back to my theory is, don't think it's just clipping on, being resilient, clipping on a few bits of AI on left, right, and center. It's about regeneration is, okay, what are we good at? What do we got to let go? And how do we rebuild a whole new system around a new vision? And then we put AI in that portion. So yeah, that's how I'd frame it.
So it's interesting bringing in AI to also this future focus, because of course there's lots of people that say all AI can do is process the past and data. It can't project or have vision for the future in a way that humans might be able to. There is then maybe an argument that potentially our brains are doing the same thing. We're using past data to project for future. When you're looking at that kind of regenerate side and it's future focused, I would imagine that comes with, for some people, fears and pushback around the unknown, which of course the past is known. How is that handled from a maybe psychological or emotional perspective to help those people through that transition?
Yeah, that is the most difficult bit, actually. So this is where I use the nature analogy, which is that I have kind of 3 steps you need to go through. And step 1 is spelt with a Z, is raze. So like a forest fire, you have to raise the ground, and you have to literally decompose it down to the compost that there is there. And then you wander around the forest that's just been desecrated, but you pick up the compost and you pick up the different pieces that are important. And then that's your first kind of phase, Becky. So it's really about, you got to let go. What are you going to let go of? There's no, oh, well, we skip over that and we'll just jump over here. And so my biggest problem is getting people to really let go and do that raise properly. And it really takes some time. And some leaders I've worked with and organizations don't want to go there at all. So, but that's the raise phase. And then the next phase is, so, okay, we got our compost. We have a rough direction, and then we start planting some seeds. So that becomes the enrich kind of phase moving forward. And then if we get through those 2, that's your game plan in place. You know where you're heading. You've got your mindset aligned. And then you get to once you know where you're going, you grow. So then you pump your resources into it. And then you come back, a different forest will come out of it. More diverse or different, but definitely different. But that will be where the future lands. So yeah, it's getting people to really let go. That's the really hard bit. And some people just fall blank. They just are not interested in that.
I assume in the case of business change, I mean, maybe in fishing communities, I would doubt. But let's say in a business, things change and people go, I'm gone then, right? I'm going to take myself away from this. I'm assuming that doesn't happen in communities. It works itself out some way. I would imagine for lots of companies, if they're needing to go through, let's say, implementing AI or bringing people back to the office, things that might be scary for people. They're also having to consider the risk of making the change versus the reward of a potential or a vision, but that isn't yet real. Do you have any insights on that kind of decision-making process before anything's actually implemented to balance those 2 sides?
Yeah, I'm a hardcore on this one. At that point, I would quote, you can either be a dinosaur and go extinct, or you can become something else and grow into something else. So for me, and I think, everyone at the moment seeing the rhetoric around AI is very much, you have to change our systems, we have to change, etc. The rate of change and the changes that are coming down in the next 10 years. I mean, it was climate for a while. Then it was, we've got immigration, we've got all these things. We are going to see systematic crisis after crisis after crisis now. So for me, it is we have the opportunity to really rethink humans, business, and how all these things come together. But the pace of change now is going to bring down a lot of the current systems that we rely on day to day, whether it's democracies or business. So for me, that's the more scary part. It's not about reinventing your business. It's about really looking at what's going on globally and getting ahead of that. So we have a choice. We can sit there and let it happen to us, or we can try and create the future that we want and get ahead of it. And that, for me, is the opportunity that we have ahead. It is quite an amazing time to be alive on the planet. So I'm very hopeful. But yes, that would be how I'd frame it, Becky.
Very with you.
You mentioned change and anti-resilience. Is there an argument to be made, or when is there an argument to be made for not transforming? There have been numerous examples of companies pivoting too soon. Could you maybe speak to maybe the signals or how to read when to stand your ground?
Great question. So for me, I would go back to what are the assumptions that your business model was founded on? And let's really spend some time thinking about when you created it, this is what it looked like. What were those assumptions that I hope have been written down, sometimes are not, that have guided your company to becoming what it is now? So let's go back to that and then really dive into those assumptions and then challenge them. And then once we can lay out, okay, so here's the new assumptions, or if nothing's changed, if we're still in the same place and those assumptions still hold true, no need for change. You're in a good place. But if some of those assumptions have changed, then we need to explore which ones are going to be relevant, and not just now. Where's the puck going to in the next 5 to 10 years, and how will those assumptions probably change? And no one can predict. And Becky, as you mentioned earlier, the AI always looks back, so it's only learning from the past. But let's think about what. And I don't think I can't think 5 years ahead now at the moment, the pace of things. So in 2 years' time, what possibly could have changed, and what are 2 or 3 scenarios, and then we build on that, David. So that would be where I'd challenge the client or the person to have a real think. But again, as a management team, think that through, make sure all the voices, to the extent possible, are represented in that conversation.
If we could go very high level for a moment, you've lived, like you mentioned, in hundreds of communities. You speak a few languages, spent a quarter of a century outside your country of birth. As we look at the rate of change becoming faster and just ubiquitous, what are your thoughts on protecting culture and identity in discrete pockets versus a global community, a global, let's say, for lack of a better word, governance? Have you thought about that? And do you have any kind of could you share kind of your thinking about where you think we might be headed, or where might be a good outcome of balancing diversity with, I guess, group belonging?
Oh, that you've certainly got your good ones for me today. So questions. I think I haven't really thought through the community versus the kind of the global systems. I think for me, though, one thing I am pursuing and exploring is how can we use AI to capture some of the. So, for instance, every year, I think 14 languages are lost across the planet. We're losing all these plants, all this indigenous knowledge. You know, that some elders that I've worked with over the years are passing on very oral cultures, and there's no one to pass on. But some community members have gone, or they've kind of moved away. So, one big hope is how can we use AI and systems like that to really capture some of this knowledge, this tacit information and knowledge that's gone through generations, and make sure they become our humanity heirloom? Because that's my scariest thing, is we're all going to end up just as one kind of multi something, but it's with no diversity. For me, I'd love us to have, everyone should be unique. We have a set system of governance and values and justice. Those things need to sit at the top level. But I hope we can still be very diverse humans. I think in an ecosystem, in an ocean ecosystem, the more diversity, the better. So I don't want us to end up with just a monoculture. But yes, for me, it's how can we use these lovely tools that are coming on through technology to capture some of that and engage them before we do lose some of that information and lose that diversity, and we become a bit more, we'll all be grey rather than different colours of the rainbow, which I don't think will be good for us as a species.
Agreed.
I didn't know if you had a follow-up to that one, David.
Oh, I easily could. I wanted to make space for you if you wanted. Becky, did you want to add something or jump in?
So I wanted to pivot, which is a title or a question on your title. But is there anything you wanted to dig into that before I move on?
Well, yeah, I guess speaking of AI and some of my learning in that space from a kind of a computer science lens, which I haven't studied formally, I've learned just through conversation. There's a concept of Markov blankets. Have you heard of that term at all, Stuart? Markov blankets?
No.
It's I'm probably not the best person to describe it to you, so I'll describe it to you as I understand it. Huge asterisk, do your own research. But I think that a useful analogy might be flies in a bottle. So I've long, or maybe a like Russian doll kind of a fly in a series of bottles. I've wondered, why do millions of people or billions of people in some cases fervently believe one thing when you have evidence that billions of people believe in another thing? Like, how could they each believe so deeply? I'd be kind of curious, like, are they both right? Are they both wrong? Is one right? Is one wrong? And I really kind of wrestled. It bothered me that like, there's something there that I can't articulate. Why is that? And the concept of the Markov blanket, it's like this statistical membrane that you filter incoming information that's either useful or rejects things that aren't useful to your worldview, your identity, your religion, your sports team, your passport, etc. And that helps, I think, explain why we dig in. I remember when the Big Bang theory in the 90s, it was all over the news, like, oh, they just validated this. This is how our universe started. And at the time, I was in the US, and I remember there was a kind of a heated discourse between, let's say, the scientific community and the religious community. And they each thought it validated their worldview. And I thought that's really interesting. So you found proof that you're right. And each side says, yes, I'm right. Here's proof. It's the same proof. And so if you fold that out like origami, this complexity, I think it's, to some extent, it's all true, or at least as true as it is useful. And so in preserving that identity and that fabric, I think comes from expanding the levels of complexity that you're comfortable with, so that you can still be Stuart from the UK, but you can speak a handful of languages and get around the globe. And I think that for each of us, that is perhaps the way forward, and that, like you mentioned, AI can help us as almost like a I guess, a translator, for lack of a better word, put things into ways that can kind of slip through that membrane and that we can adopt and then perhaps expand that membrane. But I do see that as kind of the challenge with the speed at which change is coming, because we probably will need to pull it in somewhat the same direction. But if we believe in vastly different things, that might be difficult to do. So we have to somehow preserve the diversity while also navigating like together. It's kind of a contradiction, but I guess that's kind of what life is.
Yeah. Yes, so lovely. I never thought of it like that. Two things from me is just, so all of a sudden, if you're a fisher in the middle of Asia Pacific, knowledge has been democratized and you have access on a cell phone. We're all level playing field now. We all have a similar access to all that human knowledge. That's one. But two, I would say that LLMs, as we know it, are very biased, and they have a certain point of view based on the training data that it has been used on. So I think this is just the first phase of AI. I think we're going to see a lot of different AI kind of systems coming on, and I hope there'll be a lot less biased but serve the needs of each individual, whether it's a community in the middle of the Pacific or somewhere else. I think we're just beginning to see the first wave. So moving forward, so that would be all I'd add to your thinking, David. Moving forward, so I'm hopeful. But at the moment, what you've got is trained on the English, Western, slightly American, Canadian kind of. So this is what we're seeing in these LLMs, but there is so much more available globally, and that's why I look forward to AI capturing some of that and bringing that diversity in, and it will be in different systems, etc., moving forward. But yeah, that's all I'd add.
To me, a couple of questions came up then, listening to you both. I think it's a fascinating philosophy, really, on really, if can culture be coded? Can human experience be coded? Can that be something that AI could ever be able to really understand the true diversity of what it means to be human and be able to therefore use it for our betterment? Or is it a better thing that it's not coded and it's a human thing, and you have to speak to people and you have to go places for you to really understand the breadth of these things? It's more just a philosophical question there. It doesn't need an answer. Just put that out. But what I was thinking there from what David was saying with that membrane, that, Stuart, do you think that AI has especially because it is biased now, the risk of doubling down on the differences that we have, fueling our own thought process because it's telling us that we're right, and causing, therefore, bigger gaps between belief systems, slower ability to progress because of that? Or do you see that AI could be a force for the other side of that?
I think we have to lead it forward. But the problem is, it's such a sycophant, isn't it? When you say, it tells you, oh, you're amazing, you know all these things. That's how it's trained to do us. So for me, so this is, for me, version 1.0. And I'm sure for many people who have been working in the field for decades, this is version 7.0. But for me, let's treat it as version 1.0. It's given us an idea of what it can do, but I hope there's going to be lots of other different models that will come up. And even I'd love to have a AI that says bias based on your experience. So it's something that actually gives you feedback to kicks you in the right direction for where you're being biased. But I think what we're going to see as well is that we have humans, we have AI, and then now there's all these brain interfaces. We're going to have people are going to plug in whatever form or manner that's going to be, and there's going to be another, dare I say, species in a way that's going to come out and evolve from that. So yes, I think it's just an amazing time to be alive. But I think we just need to lead through and from the front and not let some of these issues, let others have control of these issues, I'd say. So for me, let's just make the future that we want to.
David, sorry, I didn't know if
It's
you
okay
had
if
a
I
follow-up.
jump in, Becky?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to take another pivot and talk a little bit about businesses and failure modes and exits, because you have some pretty significant experience here. For one, you've advised the Packard Foundation through a 20-year regional exit that's now considered a benchmark, as I understand. Now, there's a lot in the news about launches and raises, but not as much attention, I don't think, focused on the endings for various reasons. Could you talk about what a well-designed exit teaches you about, or what it should teach us about running a company?
Absolutely. So, yes, I had the pleasure of working with some colleagues in the Pacific after many years of their investment, doing a transition across Melanesia and Micronesia, so Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Fiji, and then so Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, where the very strong conservation focused collective of NGOs and government partners. So for me, it's about it was really about how do we build the institutional knowledge and make sure that what we, the foundation, had learned was captured by the local partners, again, across that diverse, to your civil society organization, the actual fishers and the stakeholders, but also the local and the national governments and private sector where appropriate. So for me, it's really about building that. So that's one. Two is take your time, really manage expectations. So we took 3 to 4 years to do the exits. And then what we would say to our grantees at the time was, okay, so we can fund you for a couple of years. You continue what you're doing, but also here's a significant percentage of that resources to really have a think about where you want to head. And if you need any organizational capacity support, we're here to support you, and we can find service providers to do that work for you. So giving them a long runway. And then third, we had a series of other donor partners that we brought along to the region for introducing them to a new network who are thinking in a different direction moving forward. So which has worked out well, actually, to kind of support them with resources moving forward. So it's about taking time, managing expectations, but being clear that this is where we're transitioning to this. Here's where we're going to be. So, but we've got a few years for you to kind of get ready and transition and make those exits. And for me, yes, I think we had everyone was happy with how everything landed. There were some winners and losers, of course, with all of these things, but the winners, I think, now are doing really well, and they've transitioned. And then, people, of course, have moved across, but the conservation has strengthened. And that was the main kind of vision for the work going back. So, yeah, so I guess they are some of my thoughts, David, on how to do it. And then tastefully, be honest, look people in the eye, and be truthful, and be that honest broker in the middle. Don't kind of try and hide anything along the way, and just being very transparent in this is what we're happening, this is why we're moving, etc., etc. So yes, I think that's would be my philosophy on my learnings from the experience.
You're now advising a $30 billion a year seafood coalition. Could you speak to the failure mode for multi-billion dollar organizations compared to, say, a village or a small company? Are there similarities, or what are the differences?
Sure. So yes. So, but just to clarify, so there's many companies involved in the organization, and yes, they have a lot of, of seafood supply going through them. But to your question, the governance is at the heart and core of the problem and the solution. And that governance, not just for your checks and balances, so your board, but also that relationship with your board and those people and the governance piece who are thinking about strategy and the executive and how they actually deliver their duties. So actually, it's exactly the same in a village. You have the village head, you have the town council, you have the different partners, you have the private sector, just slightly larger scale, occasionally larger egos as well along the way, but they have a lot more at stake as well for delivery moving forward as well. So yes, interesting. I never thought of it like that, but yes, David, you're right. Very similar.
One thing I wanted to pick up on, because you mentioned it a couple of times about winners and losers in whatever situation. Is the strategy to minimize the amount of losers? Is it to maximize what the winners win or minimize what the losers lose? Like, what's the strategy there of balancing those two sides?
For me, the strategy would make everyone a winner if we can.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the mindset of the current winners not willing to let go of their winning situation is what tends to be their downfall. So they kind of, I'm fine. I don't need to change. I've got it. I'm sending all the whales to whichever country it was at the time, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm all good. I don't want to change. And then they were surrounded by people who are incentivized to support that opinion. And so their council of advisors kept them, unfortunately, on a very destructive pathway. If we look back from, now I have the luxury of looking back 20, 30 years over the changes, and you've seen a total shift in the dynamics in the island. And that's the politics of the island, who controls the families, who has the big boats, who have big houses, etc. So yeah, I think for me, but if you can find I don't think you would, but you can, let's work for a win-win for everyone. And that situation, we could have been a winner for everyone on that island, because if they became the best, whale and dolphin tourism operation, you've got the services, you've got hotels in the long run, you've got accommodation, you've got so many other, you could just retwist the financial incentives back over. And if the very influential person at the time had said, okay, I want in, but I want to kind of maintain my current standard of living. Okay, so let's look for homestay and build you up to a hotel. There was an opportunity there for that family, but they were, no, we're not going to do it. We want nothing to do with it, sadly. So mindset, Becky. And
it
just
sounds like attachment to the means as well as the end, right? Because it sounds like, you can still achieve really what it is that you want. There's just different ways of doing it. But being so attached to how we get that, being the kind of sticky point there to...
Yes, absolutely. But mindset at the end of the day, and then not willing to raise down and rethink the assumptions and say, well, if this works in 5 years' time, where are you going to be in this? Well, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to make sure it doesn't happen. So really went against the grain, sadly. And I see that a lot with a lot of organizations, and very much so in the conservation world.
I have two questions, and they're in completely different directions. So if you can give me some latitude, I think they're both important. I think you could speak to both of them. So one, perhaps little continuing off of Becky's direction there a little bit, meaning and incentives. When we look at kind of the Maslow's hierarchy and what drives behavior, capital and money provides optionality and can address a lot of those layers of the pyramid. But there's a lot of unknowns, and there's something we take for granted, or at least I took for granted, that is stability and the infrastructure that I have inherited remaining. When one kind of sobering moment or epiphany for me was learning a little bit about Burmese history or Myanmar history, and how the wealthy became poor overnight when the government changed the currency. And so when you speak of multi-billion-dollar companies, it sounds impressive and expensive from our context because the dollar has a unit of value. But if overnight that gets erased, that's essentially vapor. And hopefully that doesn't happen, or at least, but change is going to happen, I think it's fair to say. And when you look at the new economy, AI agents moving 10,000 times faster than we are, perhaps different units of currency, what do you think is the, let's say, ground truth to hold on to? Is it human relations? Is it the connection with the earth? As we look at like incentives, money by itself is temporally important, but it is somewhat ethereal, and it relies on the value being somewhat believable in an unknown future. I'm just curious if you can speak to how should I say this? What do you think is most important when it comes to life and living?
Well, so the basics. So I think water, food, of course. That's what drives a lot of the communities I've worked with. Is so as you mentioned earlier, it's we have a luxury. We've been given, we have money, we have these things. In a lot of the communities I've worked in, it's day-to-day living. It's waking up in the morning and then have to go find food. And so there's no refrigerator. There is now, but there's never been that kind of concept. So I think that's so depending on your context, that's number one. But for me, I think it is the human relations, and our family actually has come up as a very strong kind of thing that the stronger families I've always seen have always kind of sustained much better in the units. And if we think about kind of Western perspectives on family, that in Asia in particular and the Pacific, family is blood. It is, you are united around so many aspects, which, and you will always look after your parents, and they will look after you for the first phase, and then you then return, and then you will look through them. So I think that for me, humans, but family, very, very importantly. And then of course, but if you have not a lot, then it's go get food for the day, and then you work back from there. And sometimes you land big. If you're like the dynamite fishers, they had a great life because they would go out and get their food and then come home, and then they had excess, so they'd share it with everyone. So that's why it took so long to remove it, because they were providing value to the community because they would share their resources. And so even these communities, but they're somewhat related. So they're kind of communities, but also family. So I guess that would be my thinking, David, for how we, what's really strong.
Well, not to contradict your position, but I wonder if I can't yet shake the term resilience. It's I've read too many books championing it, and it's in my lexicon. But if you'll allow me, I think that allows us to be more resilient or adaptable, let's say, to change. I think of the movie It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know if you're familiar with Jimmy Stewart, black and white, maybe 30s or something like that. And he wants to go to Harvard, a nice university, and have the fancy career. And there's this wealthy baron kind of overseeing the town. He's kind of the threat of what we spoke about, the gray. Jimmy Stewart's character, I think his name is George. He's always like disappointed. Like he wanted to be the star player, the star this and that, and he out of honor, he had to kind of follow in his father's footsteps and help the little people and kind of speak up. But he was just kind of wrestling with the magazine allure of the magazine cover and the life that he was actually living, following kind of his heart and speaking to his morals. And at the end, this little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen it yet. But at the end, it was just this really interesting reframe that he was actually much wealthier than the wealthy man, and it's kind of proving that. So I think as you kind of navigate that purpose and meaning, and if your industry goes under for one reason or another, if you've been planting those seeds and speaking to the water and the food and the relationships, that'll help you, I think, carry forward that wealth, let's say, in the next economy. Last question I had speaks to your role leading the UK and Europe presence of Cognizity. And as I understand, this is a humanity-aligned superintelligence. Could you speak about what marine systems science is doing in AI? And does your structural failure lens apply to how we're governing this technology? We spoke about it a little bit, but I just like to ask you directly about that.
Sure. So actually, Cognizity is, so we touched on it earlier. The thesis really is that the current LLMs have been trained on all that human data, including all the arguments on Facebook and all those things. So our vision at Cognizity is, how do we build artificial collective intelligence, ACI? So everyone keeps saying artificial general intelligence, but for us, it's really about how do we unite the collective intelligence of the planet moving forward. So the indigenous peoples in the Pacific or in the Mexico, some of the things we discussed earlier. So kind of really bringing that together, but really focused on that tacit knowledge that an AI and that training data has never captured moving forward. So that's where Cognizity comes in. So we have an amazing group, I think 50 plus of some of the world's leading AI engineers, practitioners with decades of experience in space. But where we've all landed as an organization is, how do we really help humanity capture that collective intelligence and use that to push humanity forward, not just for a few labs to make a lot of money, but how do we really tap into that and get ahead of what we've been discussing? I think all of this call, David, is get ahead and lead forward the type of AI, the type of human experience living that we all aspire to moving forward. So that's Cognizity in a nutshell for you.
Do you have any last questions, Becky?
No, more a comment. I think, especially the last thing you said there about Cognizity, it's a big task, I think, ahead, but it sounds very exciting and very needed. And although it might seem, at least to me, kind of reading your profile, it might have seemed disconnected, but I think ultimately it's completely connected. What people do in villages in different parts of the world, to businesses in other parts of the world, to what AI is doing to all of the world. It ultimately is just about how we manage change, what we plan for, the psychology of people's decision making and how we can influence those things. And there's so many common themes that I think are really important to explore and that can cross over. And it's be very exciting to see what you do next, how you shape and create the future that we're moving towards.
Thank you, Becky.
And the book is called The Regenerate Leap, and it's at regenerateleap.com as well as Amazon and anywhere books are sold, I understand. Is there anywhere else you'd like to point people, Stuart, and anything else you'd like to address before we end the call today?
No, I think we covered many things, but I think, as Becky said, so for me, I've had the personal experience of going through my own change. I've watched how organizations have gone through that change. And then through my oceans work, I've seen how systems change. So I like to see it from those three different layers. And kind of, you've got so as each different systems and the shock, I guess, for me, with the children writing the narrative together, is I realized, wow, system works the same as organizations, that works the same as individuals, and we're all one big nested piece of humanity in all of that. I guess, yeah. So, and just let's use these crises and these changes that are happening to reposition and integrate them into the next pathway for us. So let's not get stuck with them, delivered with bad news situations that absolutely has happened. You have no control over that, but you have absolute control over how you react and where you go next. So really can take control of that situation and move forward. That's all I'd say. And yeah, if there's anyone if you're ever in a situation where you think it's dire, no, there is always a pathway, and but you have to find it in that moving forward. I'll leave you with that, David and Becky.
Thank you, Stuart, for talking with us today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much, both of you.